Welcome back, everyone, to week 7 of the Scrappy Spring Sew Along. I can't believe we are almost done with our Library Nook quilts. And so we haven't had a video in a couple of weeks. We had an Instagram live, there was a blog post, and then this week is actually going to be the final video in the Sew Along series. And so we do still have week 8 next week, and there will be an email, but I know as a quilter, once my blocks are all done, I get super anxious to set them all up, see what my quilt's gonna look like, and get my quilt assembled. So this week, what I wanna do is I wanna actually talk about some of the things for this week and next week, in case you're like me and you kind of wanna jump ahead. So if you're looking at this video and you haven't finished your blocks, please don't panic. These are things that you can get to next week, or if it takes you longer, that's fine too. So in a couple of minutes, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to turn my camera. I'm gonna bring it over to this corner of my sewing room, which isn't the best lit corner of my sewing room, but that's where my design wall is, that's where it hangs. So I'm gonna show you how I lay out the blocks so that they get the right pattern, the right arrangement of blocks, I guess to say. And then I'm going to bring the camera back and I'll show you how I assemble the blocks. So let me grab my quilt here. If you see, when you are assembling the blocks, you want this kind of construction here to be next to one of these blocks. And I'll point that out over on the design wall as well. And then I'm going to talk about how I assemble my, my quilt. So in the pattern instructions, it says to sew rows together and then sew one row to the next row. That's the easiest way to write a quilt pattern. The way I actually sew my blocks together is a little bit different. It's probably a little unconventional and certainly not easy to explain with written words. So that's why I'm going to show you in the video today, and then you can decide which way you like to do it better. So let me bring my camera over here. We'll talk about how to lay out your quilt, and then we'll talk about how to put it together. Okay, so this is kind of the best angle that I can get you of my design wall. There's a wall right here. This is like the entrance to my sewing room. So a couple of things that I want to talk about first. This is my design wall. It's just hanging right here. I have it hung on some command strips. I can link that for you. It's definitely not necessary. You could lay your quilt out on your blocks out on the floor, on a bed. It's nice to have it up on the wall if you have the space, because then you can leave it there. Don't have to worry about it getting messed up. But again, that's definitely not necessary. You do though want to lay your quilt out though somewhere, because that can make sure that you have the layout how you want it. So a couple of things that I want to point out here, and the first is the construction of the blocks, the layout of the blocks. So if you see this block here, I call this like the 4. The dark colored pieces are in this kind of arrangement as compared to this piece here where they're in like the X arrangement. And when you're laying your blocks out, you want them to be every other. So you have the X, the 4, the X, the 4. That way, and then it will also line up so they're that way going down as well. When you put in your English paper piece blocks, that kind of just acts as like a substitute. So here you can see I have the 4, I put my English paper piece as like in place of one of these X's, and then I move on and have another 4 block here. So as you're laying it out, you'll want to pay attention to making sure that you have the every other kind of pattern. And then the other thing is the colors. So you can see I did pink and green were the colors that I chose. You could choose to do pink, green, pink, green. I didn't have an exact even number of pink to green scraps. I think I had quite a few more pink. So I kind of just scattered them throughout. That's what I like about laying out your quilt, is you can see like, oh, I have a lot of green here. Let me move and switch like a pink here and find different spots. So again, I will link that, but laying out your quilt on your bed, on a design wall, really helps you to see, make sure your blocks are in the correct order, but also to make sure you have your colors evenly dispersed. So again, this isn't the best angle, but you can see I don't have like all my green in one spot or all my pink in one spot. Have it kind of all mishmash throughout. So took me a couple of minutes, I laid it out, I moved things around, and I got it just where I wanted it. And so the next step then is going to be taking it to my sewing machine and sewing it together into rows. And I'm going to show you how I do that. Okay, so when you're ready to sew your blocks together, I'm gonna show you two different options. The first is exactly how it's written in the pattern. So you could sew this block to this block to this block to this block, sew them together in a line, sew a whole row, and then sew another whole row, and then sew those rows together. Sew another row, sew those rows together. That is one way to do it, and that's how it's written in the pattern because that's the easiest way to explain it. The way that I do it is a little bit different. It's probably incorrect, or a little unconventional, but I like to eliminate the long seams as much as I can. So what I will do is I will sew this block here to this block and this block to this block. So I have, and then I'm going to sew those two rows together, and I'm going to make like 4 square here. Then I'll do that with these, and then I'll sew these together. And I'll just keep adding to the quilt so that I'm only ever sewing like 2 or 3 blocks together in a patch. It just eliminates those super long seams. So if it's more straightforward to do it the other way, go right ahead and do that. I'm going to turn the camera around on my sewing table and on my cutting table and kind of show you how I do that and kind of build out. But again, it's a little bit unconventional, but that's the way that I find works best to eliminate making these super long seams where you're trying to get all of these seams matched up. Okay, so I just took these blocks off of my design wall, and this is how they were laid out up there. You can see there's the 4 construction here, and then the X, and then the opposite down here, the X and then the 4. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sew this block to this block right at the seam, and I'm gonna sew this block to this block right at the seam, and then I'm going to fold it up and sew that seam here. So I'm never sewing any super long seams. And of course, what I'm going to use is I'm gonna use my fork pins. So if you liked those before, you can use them again here. Let me slide this aside. So I'm going to use my pins to make sure that I'm lining up these seams here and these seams here. So we'll do this. And then we'll do this. And then I'm going to do the same with these, and I'll bring it back here and show you. Okay, so now you can see I've sewn this block to this block and this one to this block. I matched up my seams, and you can see that there's the 4 construction here and the 5, and then the opposite down here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these together this way. And same thing, I'm going to use my fork pins, match them up, and I'll turn around and show you what I've got. Okay, so now you can see I got these 4 blocks sewn together, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they are gonna go, they were like this, up here. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll sew these 4 blocks together, and then I'll sew those together. Probably what I'll do after that is then sew these 4, and then these 4, sew those together, then bring those up, then maybe I'll sew these, and eventually I will have to do 1 long seam, but to me it eliminates doing a long seam on each row, and that makes it a little bit easier. If this seems like I'm like way overcomplicating it, then just disregard all of this and do just as the instructions explain. So row by row, you'll just need to be careful to match up each of your seams. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going on this. Okay, so this concludes most of the instructional material for the sew along. And I just wanna say thank you so much for being here, for sticking with me. This was my first time ever doing anything like this, a sew along, YouTube. I mean, I had the EPP instructions, but those were my only videos before. And so I'm just so grateful to everyone who stuck along. I would love any feedback that you have, because I would love to do something like this again. So I would love any feedback that you have. I'll leave my email below if you'd like to send me a message. But thank you so much. I'm also really looking forward to seeing your Library Nook quilts. So you can either, again, send me them in an email, tag me on Instagram, put them in the Facebook group. I would love to see what you guys are making, and look forward to 1 more email from me next week for week 8, and good luck finishing your quilts.